Well, if you're looking for a reason to be excited about Ohio State football, given it's lost its fourth straight game to Michigan, you should probably look at the recruiting trail where once again Ohio State proves it can recruit the quarterback position. Brady Edmonds out of Huntington Beach, California, number 10 player, and the number 2 quarterback in the 2027 recruiting class, has committed to Ohio State. He joins Jameer Brown, the 5-star wide receiver out of Ohio, as the second commitment in that class. I'm Stephen Means, that's Andrew Gillis, and this is a Buckeye Talk on YouTube. Andrew, they did it again. They found a quarterback.
Yeah, this kid's really good. Like you said, Ohio State fans were looking for some good news, and I think the good news is that the quarterback recruiting, that train is still going. With Brady Edmonds, this kid can spin it. I think you look at his highlight tape, you look at just kind of his physical stature. He's already 6'5", he's 215 pounds. Kid's a sophomore in high school. Like, that's the thing that is always weird to me covering recruiting. Sometimes you talk about these kids and you're like, wow, that kid is physically ready to go. And then you're like, oh, wait, he's 15. This kid is a really, really talented football player. 247 Sports compared him to Justin Herbert. That was kind of their player comp, on the West Coast. They've obviously got, different various scouts and stuff. And it's a, they've got people out there that have watched a lot of football. Justin Herbert, obviously, from the West Coast. And you get that type of, comparison at this stage of his recruitment. That's a really big deal. I think you look at his highlight tape, you look at the way that he camped when he came to Columbus these last year or two. Like, he's physically impressive. The way that he throws the ball is impressive. This is a really, really nice addition on the field for Ohio State. And I think when you talk about Brady Edmonds, the quarterback, getting a quarterback out of California where the high school football is really talented, like the quality of play is really high, that's a big deal. So, yeah, I think from an on-field perspective, you land one of the best quarterbacks in the country, that's a really big deal. And I think we're going to get into this here in a second. When you talk about kind of the previous quarterbacks and maybe some previous classes, this was a recruitment that I think Ohio State sneakily needed to win, and they did. And Brady Edmonds is it's going to be a few years away. Don't get me wrong. He's not going to be able to sign a letter of intent to Ohio State for 2 more years, assuming that the calendar stays the same. Signing day for the 2025 class is upon us now this week as we're recording this. So he's still got to wait another year to get to 26 and then another year to get to 27. So you still got some time. But in the meantime, I think you should be pretty excited that Ohio State has a quarterback of this quality in the fold.
So this is the 8th quarterback Ohio State's landed that was a 5-star recruit in program history. If Brady Edmonds does indeed make it to signing day and also holds on to that 5-star recruit status, because Aaron Nolan at one point was a 5-star recruit. He did not hold on to that rankings. Here are the 8. Quinn Ewers is the highest rated of them all. He was a 2021 commit who reclassified to 2022. He was the number 1 player and top quarterback in both of those classes. Perfect rated guy. Terrell Pryor in 2008 is up next as the number 2 player and number 1 dual threat quarterback in the 2008 recruiting class. Remember when they used to do that? Remember when they used to do the dual threat pro style? I always thought that was idiotic.
It's so bad trying to look at like previous recruiting classes because it's like, this is the number 1 pro style quarterback. This is the number 1 dual threat. Hated it. Glad we're in a new era.
It was a weird time for football. Taven St. Clair is up next to number 7 player, number 3 quarterback out of Ohio. He will sign on Wednesday here. That's pretty set in stone. And then you got Julian Sand. I included Julian Sand, and I did not include Justin Fields. And the reason I didn't include Justin Fields is I know they're both 5-star transfers, but one of them played a full season at their previous spot and played meaningful snaps there. Julian Sand was at Alabama for like 4 weeks where he participated in some bowl practices.
I don't even know if it was 4 weeks. Yeah, it was pretty.
No, he was there for bowl practice for the college football playoff.
Yeah,
so
maybe 4.
Participated in that. And then he was gone by the second week of January at max. So he's essentially an Ohio State recruit. Number 6 player and the top quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class. Kyle McCord in the 2021 class was the number 28 player and the number 6 quarterback in the country out of Pennsylvania. He ended up spending 3 years here and starting a year, and now he's closing out his career at Syracuse, where Syracuse has had his best season since 2018, going 9-3. And then this is where Brady Edmonds slides in. He's the 6th highest rated quarterback in Ohio State history, the number 10 quarterback and the number 2 number 10 player, number 2 overall quarterback in the 2027 class out of California. And then the last 2 are from Ohio, and they were actually Justin Zwick's the first one. He's the number 34 player, number 3 pro star quarterback in the 2022 class. And he was fine, but Troy Smith ends up being what maybe you thought he would have been on signing day, and that's the Heisman Trophy winner, leads Ohio State to the national championship game. And then Braxton Miller, number 30 player, and the number 2 dual threat quarterback in the 2011 recruiting class. So from that list, Quinn Ewers never started a game. Terrell Pryor's was a 2-year starter, I believe, 2 or 3-year starter. He was fine, but I don't think he ever lived up to the hype that he arrived with, but he was a quality quarterback. We'll see with Tavian St. Clair. We'll see with Julian Sando. He's the favorite to be the starter when they play Texas to start the 2025 season. Kyle McCord, 1-year starter. Brady Edmonds is getting his driver's license. Braxton Miller, 3-year starter, turned into a wide receiver. Awesome college football quarterback for what that era was, but was never really going to be an NFL quarterback. And then Justin Zwick never really pans out. Weird history for Ohio State quarterbacks when it comes to 5 stars. But the bigger conversation here is, did Ohio State just kind of need a win and getting a 5-star quarterback? And I mean, you see it in the NFL. Sometimes quarterbacks can save your jobs. We're not saying Brady Edmonds' commitment saves Ryan Day's job, but the future is still bright, even if the present is a little dark.
So Ohio State fans are well aware of this. Sometimes recruiting rankings don't pan out. Sometimes they're not all they lived up to be. And that doesn't mean they're bad. Kyle McCord just shredded at Syracuse, but I don't think anybody would say that he lived up to that first round quarterback, that great billing, right? That people may have put on him. You can still be a quality quarterback, but I think what adding a guy of this caliber does is it gives you enough options to where you can look at it and go, all right, we have a 5-star kid in 24. We have a 5-star kid in 25. Nobody in 26, which I'll talk about in 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then you have a 5-star kid in 2027. And the odds of you missing on all 3 of those guys are not great, right? Odds are one of those quarterbacks is going to be pretty good. Odds are you're going to be able to rely on one of those quarterbacks, because if Julian Sand doesn't live up to the billing, if Julian Sand isn't the guy, okay, well, then you have a 5-star quarterback in Tavian St. Clair. Yeah. Okay, well, if Julian does and Tavian doesn't, okay, well, you're going to be able to supplement with Brady Edmonds right after that. So you could basically just kind of pick a grab bag there of, hey, we're bringing in some of the most talented quarterbacks in the nation. Odds are one of them is going to work out. And frankly, if none of them work out, then it's a whole other issue. And then it's what is Ryan Day doing? What is Chip Kelly doing? Then we're having a whole other conversation. I know a lot of people want to talk about Ryan Day's job right now, but that is one of those things where if 3 5-star quarterbacks in a row flop, which again is very, very unlikely, then it's a development issue more than a talent issue and a talent identification issue. But Ohio State did really need a win here. And I think sneakily so, like I said earlier, because one, in the 2027 class, you now have 2 5-star prospects. You have a 5-star receiver in Jameer Brown. Kid has Olympic track speed. That, it is elite track speed. You add him at receiver, then you add a 5-star quarterback. Having those 2 guys that you can build around is really, really big. I think that is one of the things that I think you look for early on in classes that are built out a little bit. I think 26, you can kind of see this. 27, certainly, where you need rocks. You need pillars. Tavian St. Clair was that for you in 2025, where this guy is going to go recruit for you. This guy is going to go make sure he's bringing in other talented players. He's working the phones. It might not work. Tavian St. Clair has been really trying to bring in David Sanders, the 5-star offensive tackle, but he's doing it. And you need players like that in the class, especially when you don't have a 2026 quarterback commit at the time. They don't have a pledge right now at that position for 2026. So you got a gap year where Ohio State has been, looking into a couple of different quarterbacks. We'll see what happens there. But now you've basically just guaranteed yourself 3 out of 4 years where you're going to have a 5-star quarterback coming into the building. And that's a massive deal because, again, like I said, odds are one of those kids is going to be really, really good. And one of those kids is going to live up to a really, really high billing at Ohio State. So, adding it for the 2027 class is big because you get that pillar. You can have that guy recruit. You have 2 5-stars in 2027. These kids are sophomores in high school, and Ohio State is already kind of building that out. But at quarterback specifically, you've just got a wave of talent. Kind of that assembly line is coming through. And especially when you compare it to the last few years where you bring in a Devin Brown, you bring in Lincoln Keenholz, like you bring in some of these players, like at least in terms of recruiting status and recruiting rankings, these guys are higher rated. So the recruiting, you could make a pretty solid argument at quarterback is on the up and up.
I think that 26 class is going to end up looking very similar to that 2023 class, where you end up with a Lincoln Keenholz type. They're a little bit more developmental, longer road to the field. And it doesn't mean that they don't think he can be a starter one day here. It's just you're not maybe expecting that to happen in 2025. But also, everything has to be coded in what's the future and what's the status of Ryan Day at Ohio State. Brady Edmonds wouldn't have committed to Ohio State 2 days after the Michigan game if he thought at all that Ryan Day was not going to be here. And that doesn't mean he'll be here in 2027. We don't know what's going to happen over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
But he didn't have to make that decision today. He could have.
Correct.
Even if it's a decision that feels like you talk to some people that it's been brewing for a while. This is a kid who's got some connections to Ohio. I think he's got a lot of family ties to Cuyahoga Falls up in Northeast Ohio. So this is a decision since he got offered this past summer. He had a relationship with Chip Kelly dating back to Chip Kelly's time at UCLA. So this seemed like it was in the works for quite a while. I think he came to a couple of games this year. But he could have looked around and went, let me hold off. And he didn't. And so sometimes you're just looking for signs of, do the people who actually have to be in the building think that Ryan Day is not going to be in the building? There's been a lot of things that have happened on the recruiting trail, along with what some words that way Ross Bjork came out and told the Columbus Dispatch on Sunday evening, that suggests that no, it's not necessarily a concern right now. It doesn't mean it's not something to monitor. It just means that sometimes you read some tea leaves and see how the people who actually are most impacted by this feel about some things. 5-star quarterback, once again, for Ohio State in this situation. And get the text 614-350-3315. We sent this out to our texters, Andrew, and immediately it was like, yeah, but the offensive line. And I think that's a valid point as well. As you just mentioned, they're starting off their 2027 class with 5-star wide receiver Jameer Brown, who's a number 6 player in the country, and 5-star quarterback Brady Edmonds, who's a number 10 player in the country. Big-time pickups, great foundational pieces, an Ohio 5-star wide receiver, and a California quarterback who has ties to Ohio. But also Ohio State doesn't have a problem recruiting any one of those positions. In fact, yes, I think you can make a case that they're the best program in the country at recruiting and developing those two positions right now. So if there is a sentiment of just water is wet here, but also I don't want to be negative about that because it's difficult, right? And now the question is, can you hold on to that guy? Because speaking of weird 5-star recruitments, Quinn Ewers was weird, right? Everything about it was weird. How you flipped him from Texas, how he ended up reclassifying, how he was here for 6 months and ended up being Texas' starting quarterback anyway. You think about the 2024 class and how you went and you got Dylan Raiola early, and then that kind of went left, and now all of a sudden you're playing against him earlier this year as Nebraska's quarterback. Quarterback recruiting is weird. And so this is a big day for Ohio State, big pickup for Ohio State. And as you mentioned, some positivity at a negative time in the Ohio State program under Ryan Day. But now comes the next challenge. I don't think anybody's worried about holding on to the Ohio kid who's a 5-star because, one, he's going to go play for Brian Hartline, and two, he's from 45 minutes away from campus. And that's not saying they won't get tricky, but it's less of a concern. This kid's from California, and he's a 5-star quarterback. So it's going to be a long road until December 2026 when he can actually sign on the dotted line.
And people, yeah, you're right. People, our subtexter is 614-350-3315. I sent that out as soon as it came out. And I think one of our texters said, like, okay, who's going to block for him? And that, I think, is one of the things where I think people are kind of at right now. I think that maybe shows you where your head is at. I think Ohio State still has something to prove on the recruiting trail. It is a little funny that the 5-star receiver and the 5-star quarterback are kind of viewed as layups at this point. It's like, okay, well, you should hit that shot. That should be that's in your arsenal. You should hit that shot. But I want to see a different post move. I'm using basketball references now. I want to see a different move. I want to see you use your left hand and go get a 5-star offensive tackle from Huntington Beach, California, not a 5-star quarterback. I want to see you go get that 5-star offensive tackle from wherever. I want to see that is, I think, where people's heads are at. So it is notable, and I think we do need to give Ohio State credit in that regard, that you are able to bring in 5-star receivers and 5-star quarterbacks at that level to where people just go, yeah, well, okay, well, what about the offensive line? Because not many programs can bring in a 5-star quarterback and a 5-star offensive lineman. However, that does not excuse kind of where the offensive line recruiting has been. And I think we just watched a game on Saturday where had Ohio State maybe been a little bit more talented up front, maybe you win that game. Had Ohio State maybe had a little bit more depth up front, maybe you win that game. I think that's where we're at right now. So it is a big deal, though, because like I said, Tavian St. Clair has been working on David Sanders for a couple of months now, trying to get him into that class. Maybe Brady Edmonds is able to bring in the 2027 version of David Sanders, right? Maybe when you have a guy in the fold, you can bring in that level of player. So that is a big deal for Ohio State. Check one, you got 5-star quarterback, great addition. Now you've got to prove it in some areas that you have not, frankly, proven it over these last couple of years. Because if you can supplement that talent with offensive line talent, then you're cooking with something. But right now, I think there is a fine line to toe between this is really good news for Ohio State, which it is, and there are still things to be done for Ohio State, which there are.
8th 5-star quarterback in school history is if he makes it to signing day and holds on to this status, and nothing gets weird in this situation. Signing day is on Wednesday. Get the text 614-350-5315. We'll be talking with Ryan Day about plenty of things. But there's a lot of questions about the Ohio State football program right now, but two things you can't question are the quarterback development and recruiting and the wide receiver development and recruiting, and that will continue on in 2027. It's Andrew Gillis and Stephen Means, and that was a video version of Buckeye Talk.